everybody. I'm gonna just get started. Please, people roll in later because we have one at noon that's with artists. So if you're like an aspiring artist or just interested in art, we're gonna have 3 or 4 local artists and similar artists to last year if you came to the artist panel then too. So welcome. Thank you all so much for coming to Fandom Fair. My name is Pam, I'm a librarian who has been working on this event, and these are our lovely local authors who will be just kind of talking about their works, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have if you're getting into writing, or if you have any questions about the process of getting published or things like that. So I'm just gonna have them introduce themselves. So here we have Al,
Barbara,
Alice,
Lady B.
So Hal, what kind of books do you write? Is it a specific genre or?
Yeah, so I'm a sci-fi author. I do write kind of a range of sci-fi from like dystopian to more like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy type funny. But yeah, just stick in sci-fi.
Barbara, what is yours?
Well, my main series is considered high fantasy. It's created in its own specific universe, but it is tied in with my husband's works and his friends' works. So it's kind of like a, if you want to consider like an MCU verse where our characters do meet later on down the line in each series. So,
Okay, cool.
we're a mother-daughter writing duo, and we do paranormal romance of vampires, and then we have a complete other series of sci-fi fantasy, mainly dragons.
Okay. Anyone can answer these. Like, was there a specific author that you read growing up that you feel influenced the way that you write or the things that you want to write today?
for me, definitely Tolkien, and probably J.K. Rowling as well.
How about for you?
Mine, C.S. Lewis. I read a lot of C.S. Lewis. I think yours would probably be Lindsay Sands.
Yes.
That really set you going.
Yes.
I was like a massive like Ray Bradbury, like Douglas Adams type fan. So that's
Tell us a little bit about like what made you decide to actually get out there and publish something. Like, was it something you always intended on doing? Like when you were in school, like, yeah, I'm gonna go to school for writing, or is it more like something that you discovered and then you said like, yeah, I'm gonna publish a book?
Mine, I got started in high school early on. I had a lot of problems dealing with sensory processing disorder, which is a light form of autism. And my mom pushed me into journaling originally to kind of just get the emotions out, and it built up to deciding to write universes and other stories, because at that point I found I could fix whatever issue I was dealing with if it was in a character's point of view at that point.
For me, I actually just started writing fan fiction when I was in high school. So we live with my grandparents, and so I got told to sit with my grandmother a lot, and one of the easier ways to kind of sit and spend time with her would either be journaling or writing while she's sleeping, or because you can't get up and go out and play video games and do all that stuff.
Right.
So then it just kind of evolved to the point where you post it online and you get feedback, and when you get feedback, it kind of inspires you to write more. And then, so I went to school for writing, and then we ended up just deciding to publish it on our own.
I think for me, writing was kind of always like breathing. Like, it wasn't something I ever questioned. I just always felt that I had to do it. There was just something about putting my hands on like a keyboard or on a pen and watching the ink dry on the paper that was just kind of obsessive for me. And I think while I had a lot of difficulty in my childhood, I think there was something about that was just so easy that became addictive. Almost like it was the one thing that I didn't have to try to do well at in the universe, if that makes sense.
If somebody like who is an aspiring writer asked you for one piece of advice, what would you tell them? It can be like, do this or don't do this. Either way.
Don't give up.
So just put pen to paper, keep writing, no matter what comes out.
I think to me it's that there's no right way to do it. I think everyone thinks like, oh, I'm not writing because I'm not physically putting 1,000 words per page a day. But what it really is, like, thinking about writing is writing. Like, loving writing is writing. Reading is writing. Like, as you develop your passion, there's no wrong answer to how you write the book, and there's no wrong amount of time to take.
I would say to always be open-minded. You can always find new tidbits in anything you do, whether you're watching a TV series, reading a new book, you're gonna find new techniques to branch out in your own writing.
What is the best way to publish a book as a young author? Like, what would be your advice for that?
I would say if you're doing it for your first book, to look into your different resources, such as Smashwords will help you get your book formatted to go out on other platforms such as Barnes & Noble's, Apple Books, Kobo. They have a nice, well-written guide that takes you step by step for formatting your book. Also, KDP, Kindle Publishing, has a nice step-by-step guide for formatting it for ebook. You can also go through print companies if you do want to do shows like this, such as Ingram Spark and Blur, that will help you get your book in print for a lower cost.
Okay, thank you.
So my boyfriend, he's a really talented writer, but he's kind of really worried about criticism. So I was just wondering if, like, how you guys deal with that, if you have any advice.
Keep plugging along. I have dealt with a lot of criticism with my first book because the cover itself resembles a very popular old school Japanese video game. So I've had a lot of people say that it's basically like a ripoff, or, you know, make fun of the cover or anything like that, but you just have to ignore it. If it's constructive, criticism, keep in mind that a lot of people aren't being mean, they're just trying to help you grow. But there are people out there that I consider, in the fan fiction world we call them flamers, that they were just being mean, just be mean. Just ignore that.
I would think if your boyfriend is incredibly worried about criticism, there's a likely chance that they are their own worst critic.
Yep.
Which I think is just something that they'll have to get in their mind at some point, that not everyone else is like thinking about it so deeply. And then also, of course, people, they can be ignorant of the process and not understand and say things that are rude, but it's not indicative of actually how you are as a writer. It really, I think you have to have kind of the self-confidence in yourself and the love for it to know that what you do means something, even if it doesn't mean something to that person.
Also, start with a small circle on getting feedback. Go to trusted loved ones, best friends, family members. They're going to give you honest reviews that aren't going to be very harsh.
For us, we use an editing program, but then I've got a circle of close friends that I trust very strongly, and I give it to them, and they're my beta readers. They will read it and make sure that I didn't miss any mistakes. The problem you want to be careful with is make sure you trust those people, because that book is not published yet, and if you give it to the wrong person, you really have very little proof that it's yours. So don't just hand it out to anybody. Make sure it's somebody that you really trust and you know is not going to do you wrong.
So my best friend has been basically writing stories since we were like 7, and she's always written like longer form stuff. But I feel like now that we're adults, she's sort of like not so much given up on the dream of being a writer, but has been like extremely discouraged from it. Is there anything I can do to help support it?
I think there's a lot that you can do. First is, it's kind of like, I think a lot of people know what to do with a young artist because you just pick out all the things that you can tell that is like their new style and you encourage them. But it's the same thing with writing. So if you read their writing, you say which parts you really like rather than focusing on the parts maybe you don't like. And if they're too nervous to show it to you, maybe you could take them to things that would kind of get them excited about writing again. For example, maybe you want to take them to an author panel. Maybe you want to take them to the library. Maybe you just want to join their special interests. And I think doing that type of thing can help maybe spur their excitement about it before they even realize that that's what you've done.
Speaking of the writers panel, I know UNCW has, is a week-long writers week. So,
She's in Connecticut right now.
well, I think they do, post like the video content and stuff online too, through the creative writing department. But, anything like that, or anything online, like a writing forum, or, like I said, I started with fan fiction, so just maybe finding stories that she would like to read.
She is currently writing fan fiction.
So see, you know, fan fiction, that's what started my stories. So maybe just read the fan fiction that she's done first, even if you don't really like the fandom. And then point out, you know, things that you like writing style-wise, or, you know, pick out really good word usage or anything like that, just to encourage her.
Yeah, fan fiction worked for Ali Hazelwood.
Yeah,
It
so
worked for anybody.
it worked for anybody. I think my first fan fiction was a Transformers fan fiction, so, you know.
You can also check out like NaNoWriMo, which is a
Oh, yeah.
global thing that a lot of aspiring authors get involved in, even published authors get involved in, just to kind of challenge themselves for a next step, or if they're running into a rut where they've lost inspiration for writing, it kind of helps jumpstart them. So I would definitely look into that.
Yes, because even we seasoned authors run into burnout quite often.
What do you guys do for writer's block to get out of that funk?
I watched The Hobbit. Like I said, I listened to, it's a YouTube group called Clamave de Profundis. They do a lot of Hobbit and Lord of the Rings covers. So I'll just sit and listen to music sometimes. And then I do art on the side. So I'll just sit and I'll do my pixel art while listening to that. And then sometimes I'm just like, I thought of something. Yeah.
I would say that the worst thing you can do for writer's block is to keep pushing.
Yeah.
Take a break, give
take a
yourself a break. Delve into stuff that you love, whether it's one of your tried and true books or a movie like The Hobbit that you just, that's something that gives you
something
passion
about,
and it's a comfort to you. You know, don't push yourself when it comes to writer's block. The more you push, the worse it's gonna get.
It will come back.
For me, I have kind of this philosophy about writer's block, and it's that if you're struggling with writer's block, it might be because you haven't developed your characters enough. There's kind of like a back end to writing that most people don't see unless they enjoy writing, and that's like character development helps create all the small in-between scenes, because there's of course all of these big action scenes or romance scenes or whatever you're writing, but the character development is where you start to find out, well, this character's favorite color is what? It's this is how they're gonna act, this is how they might get in a conversation or a fight with another character. And then I feel like once you get that, it all kind of starts blending towards your next scene. And then you get excited to write these fun, goofy things that are so much more personal because you feel connected with the character. And then the next thing you know, you've sped past writer's block and you're writing the exciting parts again because you made the small parts exciting because you really know your characters.
What's one of the favorite characters that you guys create?
I would say mine is a little elf that I created in our Dragons and Dragonos series. He's a pickpocket, he's constantly getting into trouble, but I've just had so much fun developing his story throughout the series, that developing his character. You can't, he's annoying, but you can't help but love him.
For me, it was the first female heroine that I developed because I put a lot of my personality and problems in her. And it was a very healing, in just writing that book was so therapeutic for me because I put a lot of my past in it and just put a paranormal twist to it and changed names and everything so that, you know, everybody was safe. But like I said, it was a very, very emotional but healing book for me.
It's very hard for me because a lot of my characters are intertwined with one another, but I think mine is probably my first villain because he has such a tragic backstory that I can't help but kind of feel bad for him in a way. But he's my favorite, definitely.
Those are some of the best villains.
I know, and I'm like, I always come up with these ideas. I'm like, well, John, like, well, what do you think if I do this to him or anything? Because my series is a pretty long one, so I'm like at the point where I'm like looking into the future of like possible endings or possible like paths to take, and I'm like, I can do this, I can do that, but then if I do this, you know, so.
I think my favorite character has to be the main character of the new book that I have hopefully coming out at the end of this year. Her name's Captain Hoda, and she's just like an overpowered space pirate, time traveling, and she's just a mess. Like, she's definitely a flirt. She's pansexual, like, and I feel like there's a lot of me in this character, kind of more my audacious side. And I like that she can kind of say and do all the crazy stuff that, like, it probably is going in the back of my mind, but I quieted down a little bit. And also it's fun to just kind of watch her create chaos across the universe. And she has a crew that kind of like, it kind of reminds you a little bit of, I would say a blend of like, again, I'm going back to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but also more like Guardians of the Galaxy, and kind of just like, they're all very distinct and just like nonsensical, but somehow that makes, it almost is like a perfect juxtaposition to her own chaos. So I have a blast writing her, honestly.
Do you guys have like a favorite book? Books you ever read?
Like a favorite book as that we've read or that we've written? Read. It's hard for me too, because
Pride and Prejudice would have to be my favorite. That is one of my go-to all the time, which is it's kind of weird that I write paranormal romance and fantasy that I'm gonna pick a classic romance as my favorite book, but it was one of the ones that originally started my journey with getting into classic literature, which getting into classic literature inspired me to get into writing.
My favorite book is She Who Became the Sun, which is like a newer book choice to choose. I had other ones, like I love The Illustrated Man and stuff like that, but and it's not sci-fi, so that's just absolutely shocking. But there's something about that character that I loved the ambition. I've always liked really ambitious characters like Luffy from One Piece, like I'm absolutely obsessed. And I like kind of the drive to feel like you have like a destiny, and so I just really connected with that character.
I don't know, like before I just really connected with Tolkien's style, so I keep, anytime I'm sad or stressed or anything, I just go back to probably The Hobbit. Yeah, it's something that comforts me almost in a way, and that's what inspired me to really dive into fantasy, because you know, if he can create such a massive thought out world, then it makes me feel like I can too.
I think for me, it would be Lindsay Sands. She writes paranormal romance, but getting a hold of her books is what originally started me on the series of wanting to become a writer.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. We are gonna move so that we can get our artists in here. If anyone wants to stay and listen to our artists talk, feel free. But we just get a round of applause for our panelists who took time off the floor to come and talk to us. So please go check out their booths. They all have books here.